en el sector financiero, no tenemos que olvidar esas oportunidades de inversión a más medio largo plazo que pueden ser una estrategia interesante. Y de ello vamos a hablar en los próximos minutos con Alliance Bernstein. Nos acompaña Tom Wijsman, es Senior Investment Strategist para Alliance Bernstein Equity Services. Tom, thank you so much for having us this few minutes in Negocios.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, and hopefully it's going to be an interesting interview again.
Tom, we need to put the focus right now in healthcare sector in the middle of all this chaos we have in markets. But if we look at more long-term investing, we need to see what's important right now, or which sectors can outperform in this long term or medium term. We need to talk about healthcare sector. Its importance became more than clear after the COVID crisis. It remains an important and successful investment sector. So why do you believe that will continue to be so?
Yes, it's interesting times on the stock markets, and of course the financial segment is very much under pressure. We come to that in a moment, but you know, the healthcare sector has always been an important and successful investment sector, and we believe for a few reasons. First of all, there is continued demand. You know, there is a difference between buying a new car, buying a television, a bread, or medicine. I mean, you know, for medicine you need every day. There is always demand. There's continued demand for these products. The demographics is important. It's a large and growing market. We get more and more older people in the world who need treatment, who need medicine, who need a new hip, eye surgery, etc. And of course, also in the developing world, we have hundreds of millions of new users. And the third point is innovation. There is a lot of new technology, new data, new equipment. And that makes that you know, there's always something new. There's always something exciting in new drugs, and of course there's so much unmet needs. There are several diseases where there's not a good treatment, and we have seen the COVID crisis. So all in all, that is a third point, and last, the price inelasticity. So the prices they don't move with regard to demand.
Tom, you mentioned inelastic demand. What do you mean with that? And could you give us specific examples for making us a clear picture about that?
Sure. Elastic demand refers to the demand of a good or a service changing significantly when the price moves up or down. For example, if the total cost of a vacation to a specific destination would go up with 20%, including airfare, accommodation, etc., demand for that vacation will decrease. And I think that one of the benefits of investing in healthcare is that these companies have inelastic demand. So if you need a new heart valve, inflation is not going to impact that decision. And of course, we have seen a lot of inflation at this moment in various goods and services. And we think that healthcare companies are quite resilient during periods of inflation because, you know, their products are not substitutable, and they deliver innovation. So as an example, you know, you could see a rise in robot surgery, which is a particular technology that allows patients to get out of the hospital faster. There are less complications associated with these surgeries, and so it's really a win-win situation. It's a win for the patients. They get out of the hospital faster, and it also means that the hospital can use the bed faster and quicker, so they are running their operations more efficient. So in periods of inflation, we think that products like these actually have increased demand because companies want to drive more efficient results.
Tom, defensive shares on the stock market are those of companies that tend to have a more stable behavior regardless of the evolution of the economic cycle. Healthcare is considered a defensive sector. Which is your vision?
Yes, yeah. Healthcare is often considered as a defensive sector, and that's absolutely true. It's defensive for various reasons. It's also a sector that is less cyclical, so economic cycles don't influence demand so much. There is healthcare companies, they pay dividend, so that is also rather defensive more or less. But it's also interesting if you look at the performance of the healthcare sector over the last 22 years, specifically in years that let's say the MSCI World, the World Index for equities was down. In these down years of the World Index, healthcare sector was always better. So specifically in down years, it's specifically defensive. But it also has offensive characteristics. It's not only defensive. And what I mean by that is that the strong performance for long-term investors over time versus, for instance, other asset classes and even the MSCI World. So if you look at let's say the healthcare sector over the last 10 or 15 years, it was, besides technology, it was the best performing sector. If you are a long-term investor, you have made, I think something like 10 or 12% per year over the last 10 or 15 years. If you would invest in healthcare, technology was a little bit better, but you would have done much better than the average of the MSCI World. So it has offensive characteristics and defensive, and offensive also in the way of innovation. It's not same old that is characterizing some other sectors, and it's offensive in the terms of innovation that is happening. It spans everything from gene sequencing that will help to us predict cancer better. It helps us to generate new drugs. So it has offensive characteristics and defensive together. And for long-term investors, that's I think very interesting.
In terms of innovation, of course, healthcare sector is evolving rapidly. What kind of innovations do you see now in this sector?
I already mentioned gene sequencing. If you can find out if there is a deficiency in the genetic structure of a person, of a patient, and you can develop a new drug that is specifically targeting that gene genetic damage. That is interesting. I spoke about minimal invasive therapies. When you can do an operation with a robot. 3D printing in healthcare. 3D printing can be used, for instance, if you need a new heart valve. You can make a good 3D image of your heart. And if you have a 3D image of the heart, then you can say, okay, I need to develop a new heart valve. And you can say to the machine to print a new heart valve after you have made a 3D image of your heart. DNA sequencing, I've spoken about that, but also technology. There is a lot of new technology and digital technologies and data management in order to have more efficient connectivity between a patient, a doctor, a hospital, a pharmacy, and that you don't have to fill out all kind of forms anymore. But as long as that is digitalized and easier access for all the disciplines in the healthcare chain, that makes healthcare also more efficient. So it is a variety of possibilities where we see innovation that is benefiting more efficient healthcare systems.
If we talk about Alliance Bernstein International Healthcare Fund, how is positioned?
Yeah, now if you look at the industry in general, 20 years ago, the big sectors in healthcare was pharma. Pharmaceutical companies were big pharma companies, global companies from the US, from Europe, France, Spain even. I mean, they were the first choice 20 years ago. When you look at the MSCI World Healthcare Index, 82% was pharma. Today, the pharma sector is only 40% of the index. So that means that there are various other sectors available where you can invest in. Biotechnology, I've spoken about IT services, healthcare providers and services. These are companies that deliver healthcare insurance. There is the segment of healthcare equipment and supplies, laboratory equipment, and of course pharmaceuticals are still a part of it. In our portfolio, we are very diversified. So we are not only biotech or pharma or insurance, but we have an overweight in biotechnology, and these are 4 or 5 of the biggest biotech companies of the world, and they have been very beneficial in our portfolio.
And John, if we talk about the long-term horizon, and well, if we need to do a recommendation for long-term investors, what's your key message for them?
Yeah, I've spoken about the fact that it's a very broad sector, and I think as this sector should be part of a well-balanced equity portfolio. But the point is that when you buy a good US or a global fund, it always contains a few healthcare companies. But there is so much more than just a few big pharma companies, or perhaps 1 or 2, healthcare insurance companies that are often part of a US and a global fund. And of course, you should have a diversification, but definitely look at healthcare as a specific component in your well-balanced portfolio. And I think that the fact that it has offensive and defensive characteristics at the same time are I think important, and you need these special companies that is perhaps a company with diagnostics, with veterinary drugs, or with specific biotech specialties against cancer. So look just beyond your good US or global fund, but also look at healthcare as an important component of a well-balanced equity portfolio.
John Wijsman, Senior Investment Strategist for Alliance Bernstein Equity Services. Thank you so much. A pleasure as always.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.
Pues nosotros nos quedamos con el